Have you ever driven out through the American Midwest, or maybe through the vast, empty stretches of the Nevada desert? If you have, you know that feeling. You look out the window, and there is just nothing. For hundreds of miles. Just flat land, maybe some rocky hills, brush, and silence. It feels empty. It feels abandoned. But what if I told you that under that exact spot you're driving over right now, there might be a fully functioning, climate-controlled city, humming with electricity, packed with supplies, and guarded by people who don't legally exist on any public payroll? Look, we've all heard the conspiracy theories. The late-night radio shows talking about secret alien pacts and underground cloning facilities. It's easy to laugh that stuff off. I do it too. But let's put the crazy stories aside for a second and look at what we actually know, what is highly documented. Because the reality of America's deep underground military bases is actually way more fascinating and honestly, a lot more terrifying than any sci-fi movie. Think about the psychology of a bunker. When you build a house, you're building a place to live. When you build a bunker, you are building a place to survive. You only dig down when you are absolutely certain that the surface is going to become unsurvivable. And the United States government has spent the last 70 years and trillions of dollars digging. It started back in the Cold War. Everyone knows about the tension of the 1950s and 60s, the duck and cover drills in schools, the fear that at any moment the sky could literally catch fire. But while regular people were building little concrete bomb shelters in their backyards and stocking them with canned beans, the government was doing something entirely different. They were hollowing out entire mountains. Take Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado. You've probably seen it in movies, but the reality of this place is just staggering. They blew out millions of tons of solid granite to create a cavern big enough to hold a self-sustaining city. We're talking about 15 three-story buildings sitting completely freestanding inside a mountain. And here's the detail that always gets me. Those buildings aren't bolted to the floor. They sit on over 1,000 massive steel springs, each weighing 1,000 pounds. Why? So that if a nuclear bomb takes a direct hit on the mountain, the shockwave will just make the buildings bounce. They engineered a way to literally ride out the apocalypse. They put in blast doors that weigh 25 tons each. Doors so perfectly balanced that a single person can push them shut in an emergency. And once those doors lock, that's it. The outside world is gone. They have their own power grid, their own underground water supply drawn from a subterranean lake, their own filtered air. It's a completely sealed ecosystem designed to keep military command alive while everything on the surface burns. But Cheyenne Mountain is just the one they let us see. It's the public relations bunker. It's the one they put in the movies to make us feel safe, to make us think, wow, our government is really prepared. But what about the ones they don't talk about? Let's talk about Raven Rock, Site R, tucked away in the mountains of Pennsylvania. If Cheyenne Mountain is the military shield, Raven Rock is the shadow government's waiting room. It was built with one specific purpose: continuity of government. That's a very polite, bureaucratic phrase for a very dark concept. Continuity of government means that if Washington, D.C. is vaporized tomorrow, the United States government doesn't end. It just moves underground. Raven Rock is essentially a backup Pentagon. It has an underground fire department, a dental clinic, a post office, and miles of fluorescent-lit hallways. It's sitting there, right now, fully staffed, waiting for the worst day in human history. And honestly, think about the people who work there. Imagine clocking into a job every single day where your entire existence is predicated on the end of the world. You pour your coffee, you sit at your desk, and you maintain systems that will only be used if everyone you have ever known and loved on the surface is dead. That does something to the human psyche. It creates a disconnect. When you spend your life preparing for doomsday, you stop viewing the world above ground as your home, and you start viewing it as a target. But here's where the story takes a turn, and where the math stops adding up. Cheyenne Mountain and Raven Rock were built decades ago. We know about them. But the black budget, the classified military spending that doesn't get itemized for Congress or the public, has only grown, exponentially. We are talking about hundreds of billions of dollars every single year that just vanish into thin air, or, more accurately, into the ground. Where is that money going today? You don't need a tinfoil hat to realize that the digging didn't stop in the 1960s. The technology just got better. Back then, they had to use dynamite and brute force. Today, they have nuclear-powered tunnel boring machines. Machines that literally melt solid rock and leave behind a perfectly smooth, glass-lined tunnel. They can chew through the Earth's crust at incredible speeds, completely silently from the surface. There are whistleblowers, structural engineers, and logistics experts who have come forward over the years, risking their careers and sometimes their lives, to say that the United States is honeycombed with a network of deep underground military bases. DUMBS. They claim there are over 130 of these massive facilities scattered across the country, largely concentrated in the West under places like Nevada, Utah, and New Mexico. Let's dig a little deeper into the actual construction, because the sheer engineering of this is mind-boggling, and it tells you everything you need to know about the intent. Imagine the logistics of secretly moving Earth. When you excavate a hole big enough to fit a skyscraper laying on its side, you don't just vaporize the rock. Millions of cubic yards of dirt and stone have to go somewhere. If you track historical satellite imagery around areas like the Tonopah Test Range or the sprawling borders of the Nevada Test and Training Range, an area of land roughly the size of Switzerland that the public is legally barred from entering, you see anomalies. You see new mountain ridges appearing out of nowhere over a span of a few years. Perfectly flattened mesas that didn't exist in the 1980s. They are hiding the excavated rock by literally reshaping the topography of the desert. They are building fake mountains out of the debris of their underground cities. And think about the power requirements. You can't run a subterranean city on a few diesel generators. It requires a massive, continuous baseload of electricity. If you pull that much power from the public civilian grid, people notice. Power companies notice. Anomalies in the grid show up on public records. So how do they do it? Some whistleblowers suggest they tap into geothermal energy, drilling incredibly deep shafts to harness the heat of the Earth's crust. It's silent, it's invisible from the surface, and it provides an infinite, totally off-the-grid power supply. Others point to miniature classified nuclear reactors, technology originally developed for fast-attack submarines, repurposed to power these silent cities in the dark. A submarine is, after all, just a mobile underwater bunker. The military perfected the art of keeping hundreds of men alive in a sealed, high-pressure tube for months at a time, decades ago. Taking that exact same technology and burying it in the desert is just the logical next step. But let's pause for a second and talk about the people. Not the generals or the politicians who get the golden tickets, but the people who actually have to build and maintain these places. The contractors. Imagine signing that non-disclosure agreement. You are a top-tier structural engineer, maybe an HVAC specialist who designs air filtration systems for high-security biolabs. You get tapped on the shoulder by a man in a very plain suit. You are offered a salary that is triple what you make now. But there are conditions. You will be flown out of a private terminal in Las Vegas, the infamous Janet Airlines, those unmarked white planes with the single red stripe that fly out of Harry Reid International Airport every single day, ferrying thousands of workers to destinations that don't exist on any public FAA map. You get on that plane, the windows are blacked out. You land, you step off, and you are immediately taken underground. You spend weeks, maybe months, working under artificial lights. You are told exactly what to do, but never why you are doing it. You install a ventilation system capable of scrubbing weaponized anthrax from the air for a facility that can house 10,000 people. And then you go home, you look at your family at the dinner table, and you are legally bound by the Espionage Act to never breathe a single word of what you just built. The psychological toll of that compartmentalization is immense. The military relies on this. It's called need to know. The guy pouring the concrete doesn't know what the guy installing the servers is doing. Nobody sees the whole puzzle except the handful of people at the absolute top. But secrets that big have gravity. They warp the people holding them. Over the decades, rumors leak out. People drink too much at a bar near a base. Deathbed confessions. And what comes out paints a picture of an underground infrastructure so vast it almost mocks the society living on top of it. This is where the rumors of places like Dulce Base in New Mexico come from. The stories about Dulce are wild. 7 levels deep, genetic experiments, firefights between special forces and entities that don't belong on this planet. It sounds like pure fiction. But let's look at the psychology of why these stories exist. Why do we invent these terrifying narratives about what's going on down there? I think it's because the truth is too uncomfortable to process. We tell ourselves stories about aliens and monsters in underground bases because it's easier to swallow than the alternative. And the alternative is this. The people running the country, the people with the power and the money, have realized that the trajectory of our civilization is incredibly fragile. They have run the simulations. They have seen the data on climate collapse, on biological weapons, on artificial intelligence, on nuclear proliferation. And their solution wasn't to fix the problem. Their solution was to build a lifeboat that you and I are not allowed onto. That's the real horror story of the underground military base. It's not about what they are hiding from us down there. It's about the fact that they are hiding themselves from the future they created. There is a persistent rumor within deep black project circles about a high-speed underground transit network connecting these facilities. We're not talking about a subway. We're talking about maglev trains, suspended in a vacuum tube, theoretically capable of traveling at supersonic speeds. Sound crazy? Elon Musk pitched the Hyperloop to the public a few years ago. But do we really think Silicon Valley came up with the idea of a vacuum-sealed maglev tube first? Or is it more likely that the defense sector perfected it 30 years ago with an unlimited black budget and uses it to move VIPs from Washington, D.C. to a bunker in the Rockies in under an hour? When you realize that the military's technology is generally estimated to be at least 20 to 30 years ahead of what is commercially available to you and me, the impossible suddenly becomes highly probable. Think about the logistics of supplying just one of these deep underground cities. You don't just build it and lock the door. You have to stock it. You need millions of meals, medical supplies, weapons, server farms, replacement parts for the air scrubbers. You need a constant stream of 18-wheelers driving into the desert and coming back empty. People who live near the suspected entrances of these bases, places with high chain-link fences in the middle of absolute nowhere, guarded by private military contractors who don't wear name tags, they report seeing exactly that. Trucks going in heavy and coming out light, day after day, year after year. And you have to ask yourself, what are they preparing for right now? The Cold War is over. The threat of a massive, out-of-the-blue Soviet nuclear strike isn't the primary driver anymore. So why is the black budget still expanding? Why are the tunneling contracts still being awarded to private defense corporations under top-secret classifications? It's because the nature of the threat has changed, but the philosophy of the elite hasn't. The philosophy is continuity of government. But who exactly constitutes the government when the world ends? If the surface is uninhabitable, democracy doesn't survive in a bunker. A bunker is a dictatorship by design. Whoever controls the air filters and the water supply controls everything. And that brings us to the most uncomfortable part of this entire conversation: the selection process. If these underground cities exist, then there is a list, a database. Somewhere, in a highly classified server, there is a master list of exactly who gets saved. How do you make that list? Obviously, you have the president, the cabinet, the joint chiefs of staff. You need the top echelon of the intelligence agencies. But beyond them, who makes the cut? You need doctors, you need engineers, you need agricultural specialists to run the underground hydroponics. You need people to maintain the nuclear reactors. But you don't need artists. You don't need musicians or philosophers or poets or most of the people watching this right now. The selection process for survival is the ultimate brutal distillation of human value down to pure, cold utility. It is an algorithmic decision about who is worth saving and who is expendable. Imagine the mindset of the people who maintain that list. They look at the general public not as citizens they are sworn to protect, but as a liability, as a chaotic, massive population that will be left behind to deal with the fallout, the famine, the panic. During the September 11th attacks, we saw a tiny glimpse of this. While the country was in absolute chaos, while regular people were checking on their loved ones and watching the news in horror, helicopters were silently swooping down in Washington, D.C. to evacuate key political figures to Raven Rock and Mount Weather. The system activated. The machine turned on. The people at the top were immediately pulled into the earth, while the rest of us were left on the surface to watch the sky. That was just a terrorist attack. Imagine a full-scale global crisis, an engineered pandemic with a high mortality rate, a massive solar flare that wipes out the global electrical grid, a sudden escalation into nuclear exchange. The sirens will sound, but not for you. The doors will close, but you will be on the outside. When you look at the sheer scale of these underground networks, you start to realize it's not just a military operation anymore. It's a breakaway civilization. We are funding the construction of an entirely separate world right beneath our feet. A world with its own transit systems, its own food production, its own power grids. A world where the elite political class, top military brass, and essential scientific personnel will retreat when the surface becomes too chaotic. And we're seeing this mindset bleed into the private sector now too. It's not just the military anymore. Look at the billionaires. Look at the tech moguls buying up massive tracts of land in New Zealand or the American Midwest, building luxury doomsday bunkers with swimming pools, bowling alleys, and private security forces. They are doing exactly what the government has been doing for 70 years. They are reading the writing on the wall, and they are digging. It makes you wonder about the decisions being made at the very top. If you are a politician or a general, and you know that no matter how bad things get, no matter what wars you start, what economic collapses you trigger, or what environmental disasters you fail to prevent, you have a reserved seat on an elevator going hundreds of feet deep into solid granite. How does that change your risk assessment? If you don't have to live with the consequences of your actions, do you even care about the people who do? We like to think that our leaders are in this with us, that we are all sailing on the same ship. But the reality of America's underground military bases proves that this isn't true. They aren't trying to save the ship. They've just been secretly building lifeboats in the hull, using our money to buy the materials, and not telling us where the life jackets are. These bases aren't just concrete and steel. They are a monument to a profound lack of faith in humanity's future on the surface. They are physical proof that the people in charge believe a catastrophe isn't just possible, but inevitable. They look at the society we have built on the surface, the politics, the division, the fragile supply chains, the ecological tipping points, and they have quietly decided that it is beyond saving. So they built a new one, in the dark. It forces you to look at every decision made by the political and elite class through a totally different lens. When they ignore infrastructure falling apart, when they allow the middle class to hollow out, when they push policies that seem to destabilize the fabric of society, you have to wonder, are they just incompetent? Or do they just not care because they have already emotionally and physically checked out? Why bother painting the walls of a house you already know is going to burn down, especially when your custom-built fireproof bunker is already fully stocked? We are effectively living in a two-tiered civilization, but one tier is completely invisible. It is a quiet, ongoing secession of the elite from the rest of humanity. So, the next time you find yourself driving out there in the quiet emptiness of the American West, when the radio cuts out to static and the cell service drops to zero, take a look at the ground. Really look at it. Because the most important things happening in this country aren't happening on the news, or in the White House, or in the halls of Congress. They are happening right beneath your feet, in the dark, where you aren't allowed to see. And the question isn't just what they are hiding down there. The real question is, what do they know that we don't?